All right, very conversational. What else? Very good story. What else? Yeah, use the different senses. Very good. Anything else?
Very energetic.
Very energetic. Anything else? Humor. Yes, fantastic. Now, we're running out of time, so I'm going to give you the 5 C's. I know Derek covered this in the last workshop. Is that true?
No, not in front of them. So you.
Oh, right. Fantastic.
In other workshop.
Right. The storytelling formula is the 5 C's. And I learned this from Craig Valentine. 5 C's of public speaking. Now, every story must have characters, right? Now, who are the major characters in the story? Craig, who else? His wife.
His wife.
And the boss.
And the boss. Right. Now, your stories probably have characters too. But, what do your characters look like? Alright?
Yeah, correct.
See? If you look at Craig Valentine's speech, and look for the part where he describes, first, where he describes his boss. What does his boss look like? In fact, don't look at the speech. Tell me what his boss looks like. He's young. What else? He looks like Pat Riley. Now, I'm aware that you don't know who Pat Riley is, but it's like me saying that my headmaster looks like James Bond. Okay, now go back to the wife. What does the wife look like? Shout it out. Go ahead. Big brown eyes. Right? Fantastic. Now, here's the thing about describing your characters. You don't just say, I was talking to this person. If someone is a major character in your speech, you have to give a hint as to what they look like, right? How tall were they? Give me specifics. Not just tall. He was about 6'2", right? What color eyes did he have? He had soft brown eyes like mine, right? You have to tell me some kind of description as to what your character looks like, because otherwise, remember, your audience won't be able to see the character, and if they can't see it, there's no point listening to it. Right? So make sure that you give a description of the character. Now, does that mean that you give me a 2-page description of what your character looks like? No. Absolutely not, right? You just give me a tiny bit of information as to what the character looked like so that I can fill in the rest of the details. Right? Now, the second C is, you'll find this out. Would you ever go to a movie theater, say they made Titanic all over again, okay? And this time, Jack and Rose met up, there was no problem, and they fell in love, and they lived happily ever after. or you have Jack and Rose meet up, they have all these conflicts where, you know, they love each other, but they can't be together, they have so many obstacles between them. Which movie would you rather watch?
The second one.
Second one.
Why?
Why?
Conflict.
Yes, smart.
Conflict.
The only reason people pay attention to any speech, to any story, is because of the conflict. If there's no conflict, there's no tension. If there's no tension, there's no suspense. And if there's no suspense, there's no reason for listening. Right? What's the suspense? What's the conflict in your speech? Because if your story doesn't have a conflict, there's no reason for me to listen. Now, here's the other thing. I want your conflict to be similar to mine as an audience member. I want to be able to relate to your conflict, right? So that I can actually take away something valuable from your conflict. So make sure that your speech has a conflict. What's the conflict in the speech?
You want to leave the company, but the boss doesn't.
Yeah, shout it out.
Yeah, you want to leave the company, but the boss doesn't want him to.
Yeah, exactly. And do you notice that the conflict escalates? It's not just a small conflict, it escalates. What happens? He gets offered this salary and then
he raises the salary.
raises the salary. Conflict gets higher. What happens again?
Yeah.
Raises the salary again, right?
Over
and over. So the conflict is like the Titanic. The ship keeps on sinking, right? It's like when you watch a boxing movie. If you watch Rocky, he starts off fighting a character and he wins easily. Goes to the next person, right? This guy's stronger, but he manages to win. Then he comes to the final one. That's where, when Chloe and I are watching a movie, she's grabbing my arm, she's going, oh my gosh, will they survive, right? So you have to have a conflict that is so big that your audience members have to pay attention. Now, what happens after the conflict? One of the most common mistakes with Toastmaster speeches is the person will go, and suddenly I realized that, you know, I should just quit my job. Yeah. And they pretend that they always had the answer. They go, suddenly I realized 1 + 1 = 2. And I used to do this as well. When I started in Toastmasters, I used to give motivational speeches where I used to say, I'm going to give you this 3 secrets to living happily ever after. Number 1, number 2, number 3. There was no conflict, so people weren't interested. And second, I had no credibility. And as a speaker, unless you're someone famous, you don't have credibility. So you need someone to have a cure. Right? A cure is something that solves the conflict. And it doesn't come from within the speaker, it comes from somewhere outside the speaker. So in this case, where does the cure come from? Yeah, his wife. Right? His wife is the guru in the speech. She gives him the wisdom that allows him to overcome his conflict. Now it doesn't have to be the wife that has to be the one who solves your problem. Maybe you're not married, okay? What else can it be? Where else can you get a cure? Mother, friend, but it doesn't even have to be a person.
Yeah.
What else can it be? It can be a movie, yes. Jim Key's speech, case study number 2, it was about a movie that he watched, right? It can be about a book that you've read, but you have to find the answer from somewhere outside of you, because if you find it within you, it's not believable. Right? It's suddenly saying, I suddenly knew the answer. How?
How?
Yeah? So it has to come from outside you, and that's much more credible. Now there's something else. What specifically about the cure? What line is it where everyone, What's the line that his wife said? What line do you remember? If you remember one thing, what do you remember?
Dreams are not for sale.
Now, do you really think his wife came up with that amazing phrase when he was having that? So you have to have your message, the cure, in one very powerful line, right? And it has to be shorter than 10 words. Make it something that is very memorable. So it can be, your dream is not for sale. Or like PH's speech. What was the last line you ended with? It was, don't go through it, grow through it, right? It's rhyming, it's got alliteration, and people will remember that. Don't go through it, grow through it, right? So get a line which gets your wisdom in. Now, I was having a conversation with Lance Miller, who is the 2005 World Champion of Public Speaking. And during my speech, he said, Akash, did this actually happen? And I said, no, it didn't. And he said, you know what? That's good. Because we're in Toastmasters. We're not in Truth Masters. Right? It's Toastmasters. It's not Truth Masters. Because your stories...
Sounds like it's true.
See, the thing is, your stories and your real life will never be as impressive as that. So even if someone doesn't come up with that brilliant piece of wisdom, that doesn't mean you can't change their words. Your mom doesn't have to say something very powerful. Maybe it was something that she showed you, but you don't have enough time in a 7-minute speech to talk about all the experience that she went through to show you. So just take all the wisdom and give her the dialogue in some very nice, rememberable line. So always have a cure in a very nice line. Now, after the cure, there has to be a change in the character. Right? So you have this conflict, so you have these characters, they go through this conflict, and after the conflict, they get a cure, and after the cure, they have to have a change. Right? Otherwise, if there's no change in the character, there's no growth in the character. Right? So how does Craig's life change after the speech? After the advice that he receives? What happens to him?
Say no to the boss.
Yeah, he says no to the boss. And what specifically happens to him after that?
He became the world champion.
Well, he becomes a world champion and...
He speaks in many countries.
Yeah, he speaks in many countries. So when you talk about the change, you have to have some results that you talk about. Right? Because really, when you're speaking, you're giving advice to your audience members. And in order for them to accept the advice, they have to have some results. So you can't say, I suddenly learned this, and next time I'll do something better. It has to be, I learned this, I've applied this, it's worked for me. And unconsciously, they start thinking, if it works for him, it'll work for me too. And final one is, and it's called the carry-out message. Right? And that is the tell a story, make a point. The carry-out message is the point, where it goes, your dream is not for sale. So you turn around, you look at the audience, you pause, you look at one member in the eye, and you deliver your line to them, right? So now you're carrying the message onto someone else, and they'll carry it to someone else. We're running out of time, so I'm speeding up. Right, and then what's the VAX? What's the V in this case? Look at one particular scene that I like the most, which is page number 2, third last paragraph. But if you had been sitting beside me and my wife. So what's the visual thing? What can you see? You can see the sofa. What else? Right? He's sitting beside his wife. Right? That's the visual. Right? What's the auditory? What can you hear?
The discussion.
Yeah, you can hear the dialogue between the characters. What's the kinesthetic? What can you feel?
Comfortable?
Yeah, you feel comfortable. What else do you feel?
Leather.
What's that?
Leather.
Yeah, you can feel the leather. Exactly, you can feel the leather. And you can feel the cookies baking in the background. You can feel the warmth, right? And what's the S? What can you smell?
Chocolate.
Yeah, chocolate chip cookies, right? Chocolate chip cookies baking in the background, right? So in that little paragraph, you have all the senses, and that's why you get transported into the scene. So you don't have to have a long description, just have the VAKS in a very short paragraph, and you'll transport the audience into the scene. Now, another technique, he transports you, he takes you into the scene. He says, if you had been sitting beside me and my wife, you're there, you're sitting beside him and his wife. So put the audience in your scene and have the VAKS, and you've got a powerful story right there. Right? Now, last one. I know we're out of time. Alright, so we have A, B, C, C, right? The last C in this one is still carry out message, but there's something that you do over here at the end of your speech, which is called giving your audience a next step. Right? So it's okay for you to tell your story, tell about all the conflicts that you've gone through, but you have to give the audience one tangible next step that they can take after listening to your speech. That's really where the value is. And so what does he say in this speech? What's the next step? What's the tangible action he wants you to take?
So it's yours.
What's that? Should say that?
Your dream, my dream is not for sale. So as yours.
Yeah, and neither is yours. And here you go. He goes, you cannot let the good get in the way of the best.
Yeah,
right? So he gives you 2 pieces of advice, and that's the message that he wants you to leave with. So, quickly summarize. What kind of opening should you have? 3 ways of opening.
Attention.
Yeah. So attention grabbing opening. How do you make that?
Ask questions.
Ask a question, a you-focused question. What else?
And the V words.
And what? Visual words. Yes. What else? Right. Use some of the VAKS, and if you have a joke like Pong Yu Yang, that's fantastic, right? What about the body? How do you tell a story and make a point? What are the 5 C's? Characters. And then what do you do with the characters? You throw them into a conflicts. Yeah, you have a description of the characters. Throw them into a conflict. After the conflict, you have a cure that comes from a guru that's outside yourself, and then you have a change in the character, and you show the results that you receive. And finally, you have a carry-out message for the audience. And finally, in your conclusion carry-out message, you relate everything in your speech back to your audience. Right? I've rushed through this stuff, but if you want stuff, you can give your email addresses to...
I have email address.
Oh. You have everyone's email address. I haven't even covered half of what I wanted to cover. I'll send we have 4 ebooks free. I'll send that over to Lily, and she'll send it over to you. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful.